Hashtag Speak Easy podcast listeners. Can I listen? With all I get in understanding, having wisdom has definitely taken on a different image as centuries have passed on. We think about what wisdom, really looked like for our grandparents and great grandparents. We think about what wisdom may look like for our children and our grandchildren and great grandchildren. And there are some key elements when we think about wisdom and being wise that are staples that we're going to discuss in this episode, but also how just our perception of wisdom has changed over time. And that's why I'm super excited about my guest for today. Hello, Dr. Elvir. How are you?
Very good. Thank you very much. And thank you for the great introduction.
Super excited about this conversation because I am someone that I am an avid reader. I'm always reading, but I read not just to be able to say I read a book, but I read to kind of take something from it. And so wisdom has always been really high on my priority list. So with that being said, before we hop into today's discussion, I want you to introduce yourself to the studio audience.
Sure. So my name is Elvir Causevic. I'm originally from Bosnia in Europe. I've been here now in the States for 30 plus years. And my father of 4 kids from 11 to 25. And I've learned mostly from them and just managing how that works. I've trained as an engineer and as a lawyer. I've worked in investment banking and in Silicon Valley and a whole variety of places. But what I always enjoyed most was working with people and both learning from people who have been the wisdom elders and the wisdom keepers in my life. And they come from all walks of life, right? I've met them in business and outside of business. And then passing on these lessons to people that I've had a chance to employ and hire and train and mentor, both at work and outside of work.
This is going to be an amazing conversation because when we think about wisdom, wisdom is seen from the eyes of experience. It's seen from the eyes of your environment. And I know as an engineer, you guys, engineers, can take it all apart and put it all back together.
With some leftover screws, but yes.
And so that's why I was so excited about this conversation because I really want to get to pick apart what wisdom is and then kind of put it back together in this episode. Because even though it may look different, pieces of it may look different for our children and grandchildren, there are still some key elements that will make this the episode that you'll kind of come back to, like, okay, what were the things that they said in order for me to kind of gain wisdom? So let's start. What is the definition of wisdom?
Well, you start with absolutely the hardest question, that if you read 200 books on wisdom from any age or time, you'll get 201 different definitions of wisdom. But what's interesting and actually amazing is that across cultures and across religions, across traditions, across ages, including the latest science and neuroscience, there are some things in common across the definitions of wisdom. And they basically have to do with living a good life, like the skills to live a good life, and a balance between, really operative word always in wisdom is balance, 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 balance. No matter which religion, which tradition, which historical time period you look at, it's about the balance. And the balance is between myself and others, what I do for myself and what I do for others in my life. The balance between what I do right now that works for me and for others versus the next generation, or versus even me in the future. And if you look at some Native American traditions, for example, they talk about the 7 generations. So what works for me now, what works for all around me right now, and what's going to work for the next 7 generations. So it's really that balance between self and others, between now and later. And then there's always an element of empathy and compassion and a greater good. So no matter if you read, from the earliest, traditions and earliest cultures in Africa, in Australia, and pretty much on any continent, they'll talk about this idea of balance, and this idea of now and later, and the idea of how do we aim for the highest good for all, and having empathy and compassion in our heart for others.
Such amazing points, because there's an idea of wisdom just meaning I gotta know everything. I gotta read all the books. I have to take all the classes. I need to literally digest it all. And can we just be honest? When we look at what wisdom really stands for, it's not really how much, it's the significance of what you really know.
Yeah, and it's also, I couldn't agree more, but it's also about the difference between kind of intellectual knowing in your brain and incorporating all different kinds of knowing. So for example, if you look at one of the greatest teachers of wisdom is nature. Nature, when we leave it alone, right? Nature is in balance, right? It's in perfect balance and it works just fine. And there's just enough of this and just enough of that. And it takes a long-term view. And if you look at some of the latest science in biology, how the trees are communicating with each other through the roots, and they're sending chemical information to each other through the fungi, through the earth, and through the whole set of things in nature. The more we learn about with the latest scientific tools, people measure all kinds of different chemicals that how nature communicates with itself, how animals communicate with each other, how whales communicate with each other. It's really a beautiful balance. So there's one teacher we already have that's accessible to all of us. We just got to open the door and walk outside and just be keen observers of what's happening in nature. Now, the ancient humans, right, the first humans in Africa and Australia and elsewhere, they were keen observers of nature. And that's where the first wisdom teachings come from. And then we had, of course, the first, the first tribes that showed up, the first groups of people that worked together, that realized social wisdom. How do we work together with each other for the greatest good of everybody in the tribe, everybody in the community, everybody in our society? So that's the first times we're seeing altruism. We're seeing people helping each other, people being social with each other. But we're also seeing the beautiful side of life. We're seeing music and dance and enjoyment, and caring for each other. So wisdom is not really book smarts. It's also about going back to nature, going back to the ancient teachings. And frankly, the one thing I'm most excited about is how much guidance or wisdom comes from our bodies. If we simply turn inside, you'll see in every major religion, in every major tradition, it'll talk about mindfulness, reflection, time to go inside. No matter if you look at Sufism, if you look at Christianity, if you look at Buddhism, if you look at African religions, if you look at shamans, no matter which part of the world you go to, there's always this element of introspection and going inside and listening to our bodies. It's an amazing source of very useful information about our emotions, about getting guidance, about how we say, like, it just doesn't feel right in my gut. Well, yeah, there's a reason for that, right? The latest neuroscience tells us how many nerves and nerve endings we have in our actual gut, and where the serotonin is produced and where the serotonin is inhibited. We always keep going to the head, read books, go to class, and shove information into our head. And when you look at wisdoms, both ancient wisdoms and the latest academic study in wisdom, it's the body is an incredible source of wisdom. Nature is an incredible source of wisdom, if we just take the time to listen and pay attention.
It's interesting because even when we think about meditation, it's a simple task that is so hard for people to do, because I have to sit still and ultimately do nothing. And we've been taught you always should be doing something. You should always be creating. You should always be learning. These are literally the statements that are thrown out in business, in life, in school. You should always be doing something. There should never be a time where you're just sitting still and allowing yourself to be at peace. And in all actuality, that's where we can go and kind of reset ourselves. That's that moment where we can go ahead and be a lot more focused because we've taken that time apart to just kind of sit and just be in that moment. Which leads me to, that idea of being in the moment.
Yeah.
Wisdom allows us to slow down and not be so focused on what the next best thing is, but to enjoy what it is that we actually have. That piece of it is really something that I've had to work on, over the years, because it was always, going after this and trying to make this happen. And especially as a single mom, you're running here and running there. And learning to just have those moments where I could just sit still have been very valuable. It has been very valuable. So now I also know that you were teaching for some time at Yale. And so when you think about all that you have learned when it comes to wisdom, how much of that were you able to impart into the different students that you were able to connect with? And how many others you were like, I wish I could do so much more?
Yeah. Back to your first point, I couldn't agree more. It seems so simple to just go inside, but it actually is hard. The good news is it can be learned, right? It can be practiced, it can be learned. And all you got to do, in some sense, is almost like trick yourself just to get started. And then it starts feeding on yourself. If you just get started, you start seeing the value right away. We call them, I've started 6 companies. My last company is called Upend, because we were trying to upend life's challenges with wisdom skills. And that's the idea. The skills of wisdom can be taught. And not in the same kind of academic teaching where there's a teacher and you sit down and you take notes and you cram information into your head. It's really the way we teach wisdom at Upend. It's about relying on the people themselves and their actual lives as they're living them right now. So not some, go and meditate for a month somewhere in the mountains. That's nice. If you can do it and afford it, excellent. But for the rest of us, like you say, you're a single mom. I'm a dad of 4, and just managing kids and families and relationships, plus these companies and everything else. Again, what the wisdom teaches us is start with balance. Find the time. There is a time to go do stuff and really get it done. But there's also a time for reflection. There's also a time for mindfulness and planning. And one good example is, like you said, when you're teaching wisdom, I always start with myself. How do I teach myself, right? How do I rewire my own brain so that it's not an automatic? One of the things we wrote about recently in Psychology Today is this idea of making a pact with yourself for reducing stress in your life. Very simple thing. We all have a lot of stress and anxiety. And what it turns out is, we call it pact, and it really means pause, ask, choose, and tackle. And very simple. If you have a minute, I'll just cover it very, very quickly. Pause is that first step. Is just don't stop what you're doing. It's hard to do that, but just pause, take a breath, and say, what's really going on, right? What's really going on here? Just for 1 second, what you're really doing is to bring in a little bit of neuroscience. Is your brain, the way it's wired, it's pre-wired. The decision making happens in neuroscience. They call it 30 milliseconds, like 30 thousandths of a second. Your brain has already made some automatic decision, but you don't want that. You don't want to act from this automatic response. So all you got to do is pause for just a little bit, literally seconds, 1, 2, 3 seconds. That's why people say take a breath, right? Take a breath or smile or do something to just interrupt that automatic response. That's the pause piece. The next one is ask. And really what you're asking is, what's really going on? If it's my kid, are they really complaining about homework? Or are they really just stressed out about the test? Or are they just hungry, right? I just didn't feed them, it's just, so I need to calm my emotions down here. Or if it's at work, is this customer just grumpy because of something that's going on with them? Or is it something that I said that I come on too strong? Or is there a problem that I've created for this customer? Or is it something that it just takes a little time? I just need to connect with the human being on the other side of the phone. It's really not about the fact that I shipped something and it came in, broken. It's really that, let me just connect with this human being on the other side, because it's probably some mother, some father, some, friend, something like that. Let's get back to that human connection. But your brain can't process that if you're on automatic. So that's the ask piece. The choose piece is choose the right response at the right time. Wisdom skill, for example, one wisdom skill is courage, right? One wisdom skill is resilience, right? One wisdom skill is empathy. One wisdom skill is compassion. Which of these should I choose right now, right? Honesty, right? If your friend comes in and says, hey, I'm going to this beautiful wedding and I bought a new dress and I want to go to this, and you're looking at that dress and your friend is going, oh my God, you're not going to wear that. That's awful. Which wisdom skill are you going to use? Are you going to use the skill of honesty because you have a commitment to honesty and just blurt it out and say, oh my God, that looks awful? Or are you going to use the skill of compassion and say, oh, honey, that's great. I'm so glad you went shopping and this and that. But maybe for this wedding, that other green dress you have actually might go better, with those shoes or something like that. So which skill you use at the right time, this is the choose part, right? So pause, ask, choose, and then tackle. That's the really important part. Like, just go through with it. Whatever that you decided to do, have the courage to just do it. So have the conversation with your friend. Don't just be quiet. You know the right thing to say, you just don't say it because you're embarrassed, you're ashamed, and you just kind of don't do anything. The key thing is to actually tackle and carry through. And that it's that tackle piece, it's that action piece that helps train your brain in wisdom more than 500 books or Google. Right? It's that taking of the action, because then you see your friend react or you see your kid react, and then your brain learns, wait a minute, if I don't act on automatic and I give myself a little break, everybody wins. I win, I feel better, my friend feels better, my customer feels better, my kid feels better. This is a useful skill now. I've got a new skill here that I can use, and it's rooted in basic wisdom, same things we talked about in the beginning of the interview.
It's interesting. What immediately came to mind as you were going through and giving us each piece of that was awareness. It's awareness. It's being aware of your surroundings, being aware of the person that you're interacting with, being aware. And we always talk about the difference between sight and vision. And, sight is, you see something in front of you. The vision, you have to see something that's bigger. And it means that your awareness has been broadened, because now I'm not just looking at just that individual. I'm looking at, okay, well, and I think about the dress. What are they going to think when they look back at the pictures from the wedding and, different things like that? It's that awareness.
You know what they're going to think? They're going to say, you were there. Why didn't you tell me?
Why didn't you the dress
prevent this atrocity?
So I love that, because again, that's a maturity. And it's not a maturity meaning that it has to do with the age of the person, but a maturity in the mindset of a person. In order for us to be aware, we do have to have a sense of maturity, because when we think about a child's mindset, they don't pay attention to anything going on around them. But I do remember as a mother always telling my children, pay attention to your surroundings. Mm-hmm. And it's something that they have grown to parrot back to me over the years.
Absolutely.
Because they've learned that there's value in, your surroundings sometimes. And even the simplest thing, a lesson that I taught them, my oldest daughter, when she was applying for college, I realized that she was using this same story when she was applying for the colleges. And she told me, she said, yeah, Mom, it's the ripple effect story that you taught me. Yeah. And we were walking past a puddle and threw a rock in a puddle. And I said, do you see that? That's ripples. I said, every action you have there's going to create ripples. And I threw a rock in another part of the puddle and it created another set of ripples. And I said, even though you try to do something different, or you do something that you think is going to help or change something, it doesn't stop the first set of ripples. It affects part of the ripples, but it doesn't stop them. They have to stop on their own. And so that lesson has been something that has But it's, again, being aware of my surroundings and taking that opportunity to be in the moment.
Yeah, critical. And I lose it, like all of us. The other day, my 11-year-old boy, there was something that happened at school, and I can see he's distressed. And I'm telling him, like, okay, well, what about this? And think about this and think about this. And he says, Dad, I don't need a lesson right now. I need a hug. And I thought, exactly what you just said. I'm not aware. I for a moment, I flipped into, professor mode instead of father mode. And instead of, I run a wisdom school at night. So, I should have a wise answer, and boom, exactly, wrong answer. And he reminded me so beautifully like that. And it's a skill, and we can learn this. That's the key thing, right? These are learnable. Our brains, they call it neuroplasticity, which means you can retrain your brain in ways. And we don't need to retrain your brain to be Einstein, right? I don't care to be Einstein. I just care to be a good dad, right? I just care to be a good husband, care to be a good friend. And it's really breaking these automatic patterns in a way that's not some kind of a new age hack, but in a way that we know works. What's proven that's worked for 60,000 years, from ancient Africa and Aboriginals in Australia and everywhere, South America, North America, Europe, everywhere. We know some things work really well, and we don't have to test them anymore. We know empathy works. We know compassion works. We know awareness works. We know reflection works. Let's just teach those skills. Unfortunately, they're not taught in schools. So for now, we're teaching them the way we're teaching them, but a good reminder for everybody to just pause, just ask, like you said, awareness of what's happening, and these simple lessons from nature, like the ripples. Why do we think the ripples happen in nature and they don't happen in our life? How are we different from nature? Of course, ripples happen in our life, but somehow we've just been embedded with so much testing and math and English and everything else that we think that's what it's all about. And it's not, as you know, with our families, with our friends, with ourselves, with our bodies, with our own health, same thing.
Definitely. Oh my goodness. Speakeasy podcast listeners, this has been a phenomenal episode. I want you to make sure that you go back, hit that pause button and the rewind button, listen to it again, share it out, because there were some great nuggets for you to kind of take away from this episode. And so I would like you to let everyone know how they can reach out to you for more information, the website so they can go and check it out as well, and where they can find you at online.
Sure. So it's very easy. We call it Upend. So upend.com. You can find my information. We have a number of other teachers from every walk of life, from various different traditions, including indigenous traditions. And we have resources right on the website, so you can see how these things work in real life. Right. Our whole thing is get away from the philosophy, get away from anything weird, foo-foo, la-la. Let's just bring it right back down to regular people, regular lives, regular parents, regular humans who care about their own health and well-being and that of their family and their coworkers and their community. So upend.com is the simple place to start, and we're all available and ready. We love talking about this and doing this, and happy to engage with folks one-on-one as well.
Great. Looking forward to it. Guys, let me know how this episode resonated with you by leaving us a review on your favorite podcasting platform. Listen, I want to hear it. Listen, you can even message me over on Instagram at Altavis Unmuted and let me know how this one resonated with you there as well. With that being said, I am your host, Altavis Pelzer. And until next time, don't forget to press it out. See ya.